We're recording episode 2.
And got it.
Didn't think we would make it this far.
I do think we should start a Patreon though, and the bonus material could just be me playing with my nips for an hour. Give the
Okay,
people what they want.
I'm cutting
I'd
that
pay
bit
for
out.
it.
Yeah, you would.
Yeah, I'm going to have to edit that part out, I think. Or are we the type that just doesn't edit anything, or just all goes up?
You're going to leave that in because you know it will drive viewership up. Well, listenership.
It's an audio medium, Julian.
Yeah. So they can just imagine what it would look like.
Oh my
You
goodness.
can imagine whatever you want.
It's audio. People might not even know what we look like.
That's
even
good.
better.
I think
and then
that's...
when they actually find out, it'll be like, oh.
Have you ever done that where you've listened to something and then you've pictured the person in your head as to what they look like, and then you actually find them in real life and you're like, they're nothing like what I pictured them at all?
Absolutely. Yes. And I guess rarely is that like, oh, they're much better looking than what I thought they were. And I think that applies for us too.
We're far more attractive than what you think we are.
Yes, that's true. So guess what happened to my microphone this week?
What happened?
Because this cable I've got is brand new because a guinea pig chewed through the other one. Yeah. So I happened to leave the microphone sitting on my desk at home, which is right next to the guinea pig enclosure.
Well, that's on you.
Which without context does sound funny that there's a guinea pig enclosure. And then one night just watching TV and I hear this kind of bang, bang, and I look up and the microphone is rocking on the table and the cord had fallen into where the guinea pigs are and one of them decided to chew through it.
That's amazing.
That's just foreplay for guinea pigs.
So yeah, I had to make a quick trip to Officeworks to find a cable that fit. And luckily I found one.
Hooray. Otherwise, it would have been over. The podcast would have stopped and we would never have come back to it.
There's literally no other microphones available except this one that I have right now.
The last one ever.
It's the only one ever that we could ever use.
Yep.
I found out this week that I am indeed old. Yeah.
Oh.
I woke up on Sunday with terrible pain in my neck and shoulder, and it hasn't gone away all week. And I went to the physio today, and he basically said, it's because you slept in the one position for too long. Yes, I'm at the age now where they stop looking for reasons as to why I hurt and just tell me, this is your life now. You're old. Deal with it.
Yep, because who would have thought the act of lying down would be painful?
I usually lie down because I'm in pain. Now I can't do that anymore.
Have you tried lying down more?
I think I might try some cocaine.
Yeah, that's the only logical explanation.
Have you tried lying under the bed? Like get really low.
You know what I haven't tried? I haven't tried not being in pain.
Just try not being in pain, Julian.
I'll try not being in pain. See how that works.
You're just not trying hard enough. I bent down the other day to inspect my shoe and pulled all of the muscles in my chest. But I do have...
Everyone.
In your chest?
Look, I do still suffer from costochondritis, which is an inflammatory condition that I developed after having COVID. And
sounds like you're afraid of expensive things.
Yeah. And essentially, it's a disease that you can get at any time after having a severe disease, illness, and apparently it can just happen whenever and last the rest of your life. Hooray!
Oh,
hooray. Yeah.
So
hooray.
You got over a really debilitating disease, and the reward was here's another one.
Yeah,
forever.
Here's another one to go on top of your other inflammatory disease that you already have with your fertility disease that causes
so it sounds like
monthly excruciating pain.
It sounds like you're just inflamed, just always.
I am. I'm just one gigantic flaming ball of anger and frustration.
You are literally the Human Torch.
That's why you can never keep your bra on.
Just set everything on fire as I go.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I'm the reason why that dog sits in that room and says, "This is fine." It's because I set it on fire before he got there.
Yeah, Eloise is here again. This is fine. It's fine.
All right. Should we get into it?
We'll get into it.
Excellent. Episode 2, we need to come up with some sort of proper sign in. Is that the sign on? Is it
Sign
a sign
on.
on?
Just say, "Welcome to We're Not Helpful, a podcast about books." Because that title makes complete sense.
I was actually thinking, do you want to explain why we picked that title? Because without context,
because
even with context,
we just talk about we talk about a lot of things, rarely on topic, occasionally our thoughts on books, of which we have no expertise whatsoever in that industry. So we're really not helpful.
But also the real answer was that when Brayton came up with this idea to do this podcast, he asked us, "Hey, what do you guys think we should call this podcast?" And you and I, Julian, answered with boobs, booby McBoobs, booby McBoobface, booby McPodcast boobs. And then I responded saying, "Sorry, we're not helpful."
And I said we're extremely helpful because I think a podcast with boobs in the title will draw in a lot of listeners. Because who doesn't want to hear more about boobs?
Exactly right. I think we're extremely helpful is like the spin-off where we actually give advice. Once we've made it in the industry, we start actually giving advice.
I don't think my advice would be helpful at all. Maybe that's why we called ourselves that. Our advice is never helpful.
Yeah.
Might be helpful to someone. Who knows?
Maybe.
Whatever floats your boat.
I pity the fool.
Yeah. So, anyone been reading anything lately? Eloise, I think you finished Dracula.
I did finish Dracula.
Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And what was great about finishing it this week was I really wish I'd finished it before we did our first podcast, because we talked about endings. We talked about rushed endings. And man, the ending of Dracula is like smash cut end. It was so drawn out of them coming to find Dracula in his castle in Transylvania. And the end literally wraps up in one page where they open up the coffin, they stab him a bunch of times, but the American...
Spoilers for like 150-year-old book.
Yeah, sorry about that. Spoilers, Dracula dies. But the American Quincy Morris gets injured in the fight and he dies. But how he dies, it's literally everyone's sort of surrounded about him. He looks up at Mina and says, "We did this for you, for we all love you." And he dies, and the end. Admittedly, it does have a one-page prologue, which is Jonathan Harker then discussing 7 years later. Literally, "I cannot believe how 7 years ago on this day we defeated Dracula, and now we're all happy, and I have a son." And that's
yeah.
how
I remembered that and thinking that was a bit weird.
Yeah,
he only defeated Dracula because he knows where the bastard sleeps.
That's true.
Come on, no one gets that reference today. Surely,
no, sorry.
It's like the worst line in the movie. "I know where the bastard sleeps."
Oh, that was your Keanu Reeves impression?
He knows Kung Fu. For the last time, no, you don't.
Look, even though I sound disparaging, I will say I actually really enjoyed it. I thought it was an extremely good book, very descriptive, very intense. The one criticism I do have is the fact that it is written as journals and diary entries. So there's no real stakes in terms of the first person perspective means that person is going to survive to the end of that particular entry. So it wasn't all of the characters. So, for example, Quincy Morris does not have any entries in the book, so it's unsurprising that he dies. But everyone else does have like first person entries. So I never was in fear that they were going to die. I did think maybe Mina would get it in the end because I couldn't remember actually how it ended and whether or not she did die, because I know in other versions she has been killed off. So I was looking forward to knowing, does she actually die in the end or not? I do love the parts where they keep very descriptively talking about how, Mina's like really sleepy at the moment and she looks so pale. I hope she's all right. It's like, guys, what are you doing?
But you got to consider, in that time period, it was probably very normal for women to be pale and have trouble breathing and be very sleepy all the time.
That's true.
It was all the lead they painted on their faces.
Yes, all of the lead in the walls and on their faces and the corsets.
And then the corsets, yeah.
I find it funny that Carrie
all
Always,
the bloodletting,
who is actually English, played the only American in the film, while a lot of Americans played Englishmen.
I'm always surprised to remember that Carrie Elways is English, because he's constantly playing so many different characters that I never know what his actual true nationality is.
Yeah, I know. I always think of him immediately as American and have to remind myself that he's not.
No. He made it very clear he can speak with a British accent.
Can.
That's true. The best Robin Hood.
Arguably, hands down. So, yes, I would give Dracula probably 4 out of 5 stars, I would say.
Nice.
There's like some very annoying parts in the middle where you have to try and figure out what certain people are saying, because they have very, like, the way that their wording is written is supposed to be in accent. So I'm assuming it's supposed to be in like a Cockney accent or a Scottish accent. And I could not understand what was actually being said because of the way
that's just like life, though.
Well, that's
you can't
true.
understand Scottish people in real life. So.
Just killed all of our Scottish listeners.
No, it's a fucking deal. Listen away.
That's exactly what happened. So yes, 4 out of 5. Really enjoyed it. That means I have now moved on to Moby Dick, which is exciting.
How far into it are you?
I've read about 3 chapters and I don't know what the hell is going on other than Ishmael apparently is a sailor and likes being a sailor. That's
read the Moby Dick for Dummies. Call me Ishmael, dummy.
Are the chapters in Moby Dick like long?
No, they're not. No? It's a very thick book and it has many, many chapters, and the chapters themselves are like, I'm just looking through the book now. They're like 3 to 4 pages at this stage. I don't know.
That's easy. Because it's hit and miss. It's hit and miss with some of those classics. Because sometimes the chapters are really short like that, and other times they're like 150 pages each.
Yeah.
It's when the
Terry
paragraphs
Pratchett,
are 2
who
or 3
doesn't have
pages
any
long.
chapters at all. He just writes like an entire book, and there's no chapters separating the stories. It's fine, because like he'll actually there'll be breaks in the pages, so you can tell when something has started somewhere else. We can talk about Pratchett in another episode,
but see,
he deserves an episode in himself.
Oh, absolutely. I want a whole episode about Pratchett and Discworld at some point.
Definitely.
But yeah, see, I'm the type of person that once I start reading, I have to finish a chapter before I can stop. So it really frustrates me when I'm like 20 pages into a chapter and like, I must be getting near the end now, and there's still like 40 more pages to go.
Yeah, I find that frustrating as well, because I also prefer to like bookend where I'm reading. But sometimes like I just have to go, no, I'm just going to stop at the end of this paragraph because I cannot keep reading for various reasons. I'm too tired. I have to go somewhere, whatever. Yeah. But yeah, so far Ishmael is a sailor who likes to be a sailor, and he has joined a whaling expedition and he's gone to a pub.
Awesome.
That sounds as much like as I can tell you at this stage.
Sailor's life.
Excellent. Well, I am still working my way through The Name of the Wind. Mm-hmm. I'm just past the halfway point in that. I'll give a full rundown when I finish that, but I'm still enjoying it. It's really good so far. But I did listen to an audiobook over the last couple of weeks, which is Red Rising by, and I've completely forgotten the name, Pierce Brown, I think it is. Have either of you heard of Red Rising?
No. So what's that one about?
It is a science fiction
Ooh.
book set on Mars in the future. Pierce Brown, yes, I got the name correct. Just double checked. So essentially, in the future, society is divided into various like caste systems where the Reds are like the lowest of the low. They are like the miners, the servants, the
Uh-huh.
things like all that. And it kind of, there's this whole color system that I'm not going to go into detail because I can't remember all the details of it. But the golds are at the top, like they're the ruling class, and they've been like genetically altered to be these perfect humans.
That tracks.
Yep.
Of
And
course, yeah.
the story follows a boy, I think he's 16 or 17 in the book, or he might be 19. Anyway, late teens, early 20s. And he is a miner in Mars, and they're mining helium-3, which will help to terraform the planet and eventually allowing human life to live there. So their whole society is underground because the surface is, you can't live on it. But he's a miner, digs the dirt and everything like that. And I'm going to get into some minor spoilers here for like the first few chapters of the book. So if you don't want to get into that, just feel free to skip ahead. But
La
essentially
la
what
la la la
happens,
la, not listening.
yep, good. But essentially what happens is through some terrible happenstance where his wife is actually executed by the Golds, he is recruited into this kind of terrorist rebellion organization. And it turns out, in the shocking twist in the first third of the book, that Mars has actually been terraformed for the last 300 years.
Ooh.
And they have been told this lie to keep them subservient.
Who would have thought that that was happening?
I know. So he signs up to essentially be genetically altered himself and infiltrate Gold society to take them down from the inside.
It's very reminiscent of Hunger Games.
It literally, like the last maybe half of the book is literally the Hunger Games. But it's a bit more, I guess, parts of it lean more towards that young adult audience, but it's also much more adult in certain areas. Like it's a bit more violent in certain aspects. I really enjoyed it. Like, I have to say, I would probably give it a good sort of 4 out of 5 stars. The comparisons to the Hunger Games, I couldn't really escape as I was listening to, because I listened to it on audiobook. I couldn't really escape the parallels to the Hunger Games in some parts, but I have heard like that the sequels are a huge jump up in quality. And I think there's 5 of them now, 5 or 6 in the whole series now. And I've heard like book 2 just is a million times, not that the first one's bad, but the second one apparently just blows it out of the water, and it just gets better from there.
Would you continue reading the series or listening to the series?
I absolutely want to continue reading the series. It's one of those books that some books are like, well, I'd listen to this on audiobook and be fine, and other books are like, I want to buy this and read it myself, and this is a series that I'm going to buy and read myself.
Ooh.
So, yeah.
Julian, have you been reading anything at the moment?
Yeah, I am still slogging my way through In Cold Blood, which is it's very well written, but I think my biggest problem with it is the way he paints the family out to be. I think I mentioned this last week, or maybe I mentioned it in messages. I can't really remember, but they're just such good all American people.
Yeah, you mentioned
and I just
in Messenger when we were talking.
Yeah, and I don't see any family being quite as altruistic as these guys were, which makes the whole thing a little bit unreal. And it's sort of kind of hard to get through that a little bit because it's like, they annoy me, you know.
And I
think
mentioned
it's kind of like deifying victims in a way.
yes, I mentioned in the chat that we were having about how that seemed to be the type of thing that they did 30, 40, 50 years ago, was that they would frame the victims as like the perfect victim. It was always like, oh, they had so much potential and their entire life was in front of them and they were the most beautiful, eloquent and elegant person. And it was just all shattered by this horrific evil. And it was like people who were less than the perfect victim weren't considered worthy of having their story told. So it's unsurprising that that's kind of where Truman Capote was coming from in terms of his journalism with his writing, and how true crime now has evolved to sort of show all of the nuts and bolts and what am I trying to say, like the grittiness of reality, and how sometimes victims are also assholes in life as well, but that doesn't mean that they were deserving of the fate that they received, and it's still important to tell their stories as well.
Do you think, Julian, I don't know much about the real case, but do you think Capote was embellishing it much? Like, has that been something that's been discussed before?
I haven't heard much about him embellishing the victims. I have heard that he tried to humanize the offenders a little bit too much. And in fact, he did become quite close friends with one of the offenders before they were executed. But I haven't heard that he tried to, overly sanitize the victims in any way, shape, or form. Again, because I don't think it was just that thing, you don't speak ill of the dead. In polite society. So I think that was kind of where he was coming from in that way. Maybe they were, or maybe that was just a face they put on for the public as well. I mean, the Kennedys on the outside looked beautiful and brilliant and, perfect in every single way, but very much the opposite when you lifted the veil. So I think it was just polite society at the time as well. Don't speak ill of the dead.
And also I think it's for perpetrators, it is important to, I wouldn't say humanize them, but also not make them out to be like monstrous monsters, because it's important to remember that regular everyday people who do regular everyday things can also do monstrous things. We shouldn't be falling into the trap thinking that only monstrous evil people who were like evil from birth are somehow the only people capable of doing terrible things. And we see that a lot with, perpetrators of domestic violence, where you have people who on the outside, so many people are always saying, oh, they were just like a regular person and they were my friend and they were a good person and I never saw it coming. And it's like, well, that's the point. It's because they do put on that almost facade of normality whilst doing terrible things, but there's no like sudden break that makes them do this one psychotic thing. It's like it's there and it's part of their nature. So I think it's important to remember that yes, we are all humans and that some people are just capable of doing terrible things. Not excusing anything, obviously.
And I'm also reading Phantoms by Dean Koontz, which is a novel I've read before a long time ago, but it's kind of a thriller, sci-fi, horror. It was one of the few books I've ever read that would make me look behind myself when I was walking down the hallway to the bathroom in the middle of the night. Basically about a doctor who returns to her small hometown one Sunday evening to find most of the town has completely vanished, and those that haven't vanished have died a very gruesome, sudden death at what appears to be pretty much the exact same time. And the night goes on from there as she and a sheriff who has been called in try and figure out exactly what has happened and why. And I won't go into any more details than that because the journey itself is actually very well written by Dean Koontz.
I love a good creepy mystery story. He wrote the Odd Thomas series, didn't he?
He did. He wrote 3 brilliant Odd Thomas stories and then he ended it there and nothing happened after that.
Yeah. No.
I've heard that early Dean Koontz is best Dean Koontz.
Yeah, he got to a point in his career where I think he went, fuck people, they're awful, only dogs are good, and I'm going to write about that in every single one of my stories. He's not wrong. He's not
Yeah, I
wrong.
can't fault that worldview.
I don't need to pay to know that. I can just look out my window and pick that up pretty quickly. So, yeah.
I did enjoy the Odd Thomas series, but yeah, by the end, I was just like, I don't understand what this is
Anna
anymore.
Maria, who was meant to be, she built her up
No
over like 3 or
explanation.
4 books, and never paid
No
off
explanation
at all.
as to who she was. Again, maybe I just didn't understand what she was meant to be and represent, but it certainly
If
wasn't
you didn't,
spelt
neither
out
did I.
clearly.
Well, I will have to say what I have to say about the Odd Thomas series kind of segues neatly into our topic for tonight because I
You're
read probably
welcome.
the first 2 or 3 chapters of Odd Thomas and then never picked it up again.
Really? It's such a good book,
Really?
the first one.
Only because I was in a bit of a reading slump at the time when I read it. It was many years ago now, and I wasn't reading as much as I am today. It's only really been in the last probably 2 or 3 years that I've really gotten back into reading after, I guess, hitting my early 20s, where I used to read a lot and then life kind of happened and I didn't really get a chance to do it much. But I made the conscious effort a few years ago to actually get back into reading. So I don't know, maybe I'll pick it up again. Is it worth revisiting in 2023?
The first 2 or 3 definitely.
Yeah,
They're
definitely the
very well written.
first. I really loved the first book.
Mm,
And then
it's the best
2
one.
and 3 also very interesting, but as Julian says, from 4 onwards, it just kind of falls apart with he falls into the trap of making his overarching story too elaborate. Um, yeah, it just
Kind of like the show Lost. Remember that first season that was brilliant
Yeah.
and
yes.
just raised all these questions, and
Mm.
none of them ever got answered at any point in this.
Oh,
And that's the Odd Thomas series.
don't get me
Okay.
started on Lost. I'll be ranting. It was a fucking night. It was just a magical island. Oh, it's magical island.
But it brought Matthew Fox back to the mainstream, so we should all be thankful.
That's true. Okay.
Good for him.
So the topic
Well,
today is books that we started but never finished. They just fell by the
Mm.
wayside.
yeah, I think you brought up this topic. You wanted to discuss it, Eloise. So would you like to
Yes.
start us off?
So I've got it right here. I started Great Expectations many years
Ooh.
ago.
What were your expectations?
Were they
Clearly
great?
not high enough to finish the story.
Wasn't all you hoped for?
It was not all I hoped for. Look, Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. You know what? Dickens is really hard to read. Like, I can get through Christmas Carol, no problem, but I have tried to read some of his other works, and it's just, I don't know what it is. It's just very, I wouldn't say complicated language. It's not how we speak now. It's not how books are written now. It's that very
It's weighty
classic.
and wordy.
I don't know what it is. In any case, I think I got maybe a third of the way through where Pip gets to the mansion and he meets Miss Havisham and she's all weird and everything. Famously, if you've ever watched South Park, I think it's Trey Parker or was it Matt Stone? It's one or the other. The joke is that one of them also tried to read Great Expectations when they were at like college or something, and they only got halfway through and gave up. So the character of Pip that shows up in South Park is actually based off of the character Pip from Great Expectations. And they do an entire episode devoted to the story of Great Expectations. But essentially, it ends with the ball where a bunch of mecha androids burst in and start shooting up everything. And as far as I know, that's how the story ends for real. So
That's my
Prove them
headcanon
wrong.
now.
that's canon. That's how Great Expectations finishes. Mecha robots destroying everything and blowing up the mansion of Miss Havisham. But it's just one of those. I really hate actually starting something and not finishing it, even if I'm not enjoying it. Like, I have slogged through books in the past where I'm like, I just need to finish this because I hate the idea that I've started it and I'm not finishing it. I just don't like things being unresolved. For some reason, I've just never gone back to Great Expectations. Maybe, I don't know, maybe there's the expectation that perhaps one day I will. Call in if you have read it and you think it's worth finishing. I'm gonna have to start over because I don't remember where I got up to or anything about what I actually read in the first place. So it's quite thick. Like, it's a fairly, it's half as big as Moby Dick. Sorry, what was that, Julian?
That it's a weighty tome.
Yeah.
I would just like to I'd just like to clarify something Eloise just said. Don't call in right now. This is pre-recorded. If you call in when you hear this, we're going to be very confused.
How did you get this number?
Who are you?
We'll get around to setting up a Facebook page.
Yes, well, we have an email address now.
Excellent.
If anyone wants to email in with comments or add to their own discussion, it is nothelpfulpod. So the email, let's not encourage too many complaints. It won't be good for our mental health.
I don't think we need to encourage anyone to complain.
Look, we can wait to the end. To put in all of that stuff first.
But no one gets to the end of the podcast.
Well, now they have to.
Yes. We'll plug it. We'll plug everything at the end. Who's going next?
Who's on first?
What? Where?
Why true crime now?
They're going to sue us for that.
Oh, crap.
No, we're not making money off this.
That's true.
If you'd like us to get sued, send us money.
Yeah. We need to pay
our
legal
bills. We'll give it straight
bills.
back to you.
All right. Julian, do you want to go next?
Yes. Sure, I'll go next. I'm going to alienate a large number of our listenership here probably by saying the one I want to talk about is The Haunting of Hill House, which is considered one of the pinnacles of modern horror writing. The Haunting of Hill House, of course, by Shirley Jackson, in which a psychiatrist lures 5 people to a house called Hill House that is said to be extraordinarily haunted so that he can chart their reactions and things like that. And of course, one of the characters that he does invite, turns out she has a bit of a history with the family that built the place. And of course, was famously made into the series by Michael Flanagan, which everyone's probably seen by now.
Yes, fantastic.
That's a great series. Brilliant series. Of course, not the same as the book in any way, shape, or form, apart from the name of the house.
I don't think any adaptation has ever been a straight adaptation of the story. It's always just been based on it, and then it's its own thing.
Which I think is kind of clever because it does alleviate a lot of the pressure of having to recreate something that is considered a classic story.
And gives him the freedom to kind of do his own thing while at the same time, I guess, paying homage to the original.
I don't think anyone would have known the Bly Manor story was Henry James's Turn of the Screw unless it was publicized that that's in fact what it was. But anyway, The Haunting of Hill House, look, it's very well written, and Shirley Jackson writes very well. And the opening paragraph of the book, I will say, is one of the best things that I've ever read in my entire life. It's a brilliant opening line, which is actually mentioned in the series, the book that the brother writes about Hill House and the family hates him for. And he reads it and he talks about organisms that exist by themselves, and whatever lived in Hill House lived alone. And that sets up the atmosphere for the book. And it's really well done. And again, throughout the story, there is some tension here and there. A brilliant scene, which again was shown in the TV series, where one of the girls was asleep in her bed and she was sharing the room with someone else, and she was asleep and she heard a banging on the door and a lot of noise going on. And she wakes up and she starts talking to the person next to her and she says, "Can you please ease up on my hand? you're hurting me. And she says, I'm not holding your hand. And absolute chills the way that was written. But the scares are very few and far between. And it got to, I'm really actually kind of annoyed with myself because I got about 90% of the way through the book. And I couldn't finish it, mostly because when she builds the tension amazingly. And she writes absolutely brilliantly. But when there's no tense moments, there's really not much of a story to read. And for me, it was just moments of dull sunshine between these moments of brilliant intensity. It just didn't quite make those moments of intensity worth reading through the really dull bits of nothing that happened. I mean, it was, oh, there's banging on the doors and a not person is holding my hand. And now I'm in the kitchen while one of the servants makes a cake. Oh, we're in the parlor and there's ghostly noises and the lights are going out all around us and we're all scared to death. And now I'm having lunch down by the lake. And it's like,
So
it was kind of that.
Is it like there's this jarring kind of tonal shift between these scenes? Like, is it almost like two different books?
A little bit. Like, by day, everything's happy and fun and light and airy. And then by night, everything's terrifying. And the terrifying bits are brilliant. And the light and airy bits it's just quite dull. It reminded me very much of reading American Psycho, where it was like, I don't know if either of you have ever read American Psycho before.
No.
But the day is like, oh, I woke up this morning, I worked out, I had breakfast of bacon and eggs and juice and protein and this. And then I went to work and I made these deals and I spoke to this guy and then I spoke to this guy and then I returned some videotapes and then I brutally raped and murdered 3 hookers and then I had a drink of juice and then I went to bed. And you're like, what? And so there's just this interspaced moments of sheer insanity, but it doesn't quite make the rest of it kind of worth reading through. For me,
I think that's why American Psycho works really well as a film, because it pulls those types of scenes together really well. The juxtaposition of the stupid banality and dullness of being this high-powered executive office person and then being a complete psycho murdering someone, and the way that film tilts things so that you never quite know, did he do it or did he not do it? Was it all in his head? Did he get away with it? Was really brilliantly done. And I have no desire to read the novelization of that because I don't think you can get the same intensity out of a book that you can in the film medium.
No, it does kind of work for that novel, because like you said, it does highlight that weird 80s vibe of that high-powered, soulless executive who livens things up by committing murder. And it works, but Bret Easton Ellis is that sort of writer. He's very offbeat and very weird, and it works for him. I don't feel that it worked for a ghost story. And in the end, I just didn't find myself caring too much what happened to these people in the end. I felt the best bits were the ones where it was just, we didn't know what was going on and everyone was scared and frightened. And when that began to wrap up, so did my interest in the story.
Would you go back to it and try and finish it? Or has, like, for example, watching the Netflix television series been enough closure for you?
Oh, the series is very different. The series is about this family, the Crane family. And the main character's name is Crane in the novel. And, it's all about them and their story together and how they grew apart and then came back together. Whereas the novel has nothing to do with family whatsoever in that way. All of them are strangers. They're all characters. Like, every person who goes to the house in the book is a character in the TV show as one of the siblings. But there's no relation between any of them in the novel. So it's a very different story, a very different form of closure, though I do believe, spoilers, in the novel, she does stay at the house and decides she is part of the house, much like, pretty sure her character was named after, her character is the Bentnet lady in the TV show.
Yeah.
I can't recall her name now, but I think that's who that character was named after from the book. So she is part of the house.
Yeah, that is like the bent neck lady's story arc was the most scariest, amazing part of that show. And I don't want to spoil it for anyone if they haven't, for whatever reason, not managed
It's 5
to
years old. They should have seen it by now.
That's true. But still, if you haven't seen it, please do. It's fantastic.
What is interesting is that jump scare with her in Hill House. And I knew it was going to happen at some point in Usher. I knew he was going to get me. And I didn't know he was going to get me like he did. And he got me again with that massive jump scare. And I was talking to a friend of mine at the time, and I said, "What episode are you on?" And he told me I'm on episode 6 or 7. And I said, "Oh, yeah, that was the one that got me." And he messaged me back about 5 minutes later. He goes, "Was it this scene? Because this was the scene that got me." I'm like, "Yeah." Yeah.
I remember there was a couple of really big jump scares in the fall of the House of Usher. And I think I know the one you're talking about. And yes, that was like,
Don't want to spoil it, but it just came out of absolute nowhere.
Yeah.
As jump scares do. But the way he does it is just...
because there's no lead up to it. Like usually when you watch some kind of horror show or whatever, there is that tension of, silence or the music builds to you. But like this is literally just, we're just having a conversation. Suddenly something jumps out.
But it's always a legitimate scare too. It's never like, it's the neighbor's cat suddenly in my closet. No, it's actually something scary. So
my cat's been going crazy at the moment where she'll just like hide around corners and then just swipe at you. My mum mentioned we were watching Fall of the House of Usher, and the bit with the cat, that's your cat. She's not that bad.
Yeah, cats are jump scares like in real life.
Yeah.
They can't not jump scare you.
I was watching Scream last night, and I think I was messaging you at the same time, Brayton. And of course, it's the sheriff's son, and every time he opens a door and closes it, the music swells, and you think Ghostface is going to be there, and he never is at any point.
Of course not.
I must still maintain she was a bad sheriff.
She was off the clock.
She had one job. She was running home to apprehend the person who killed her. Spoilers, sorry, but I'm very angry.
Wait, which Scream movie are you talking about?
The one from 2022.
Okay, so 5? Because
5, yeah.
Yeah, you haven't seen. Yeah, you haven't seen 6 yet, I think.
Okay. I admittedly haven't seen any past 3, so.
I will say 5 is the best one since 2.
Oh, okay.
I enjoyed 6.
I haven't seen 6 yet.
Well, get onto it.
No.
Okay.
What's your book, Brayton?
Apart from Thomas.
This was actually a really hard one to pick because I'm to a point in my life that I don't really pick up a book unless I'm pretty sure I'm actually going to enjoy it. But I remember there's a couple of examples I was trying to pick. This one is if you're ever watching BookTube or BookTok or Book Instagram. I don't know if there's a shorthand for that one. The big book that's kind of been
existed.
There's BookTube, which is like YouTube channels that talk about books. BookTok, which is TikTok channels that talk about books.
But they're not as good as us. Don't listen to them.
No, not at all.
Listen to us instead.
Yeah. But there is this one book that's been around for a while now. It's called The Secret History by Donna Tartt.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that sounds familiar. What's that one about?
It's about a murder.
Shut up.
Well, here's the thing. I know it's about a murder, and I know it's about a group of college friends or acquaintances or something that commit this murder. And I believe the whole thing is that we know who committed the murder from like the first page. We know who did it, but it's more about the why they did it and the build-up, or told in flashbacks as to why they did this murder. I'd love to tell you more, but I've never gotten past like the first 5 pages. And I've tried on 3 separate occasions to read this book. And it's not that the book isn't good. Like I've read the prologue, which is probably about the first 5 or 6 pages. And it's really good. But every time I finish it, I just go, I am not in the mood for this type of book right now. And I put it back on the shelf
Ah.
and I move on to something else. And I'm kind of just waiting for that day where I'm like, I'm in the mood for this book. And
I'm in the mood for murder. Wait.
and every or not almost everyone, but a majority of people that have read this book say it is fantastic. And this Donna Tartt is one of these authors that writes like, I think she's only released like 3 books. She writes one book every 10 years, and each one of them is acclaimed. So I really want to read this book because I keep hearing good things about it, but I'm waiting for me to get in the mood to read that type of book, and it just hasn't hit yet.
It sounds a lot like the premise of that show. Was it How to Get Away with Murder?
Haven't
It was
seen it.
called.
Yeah, I didn't catch that one. The
Well,
professor or
Mel and I
something.
started watching it. Yeah, she was a law professor, and she taught criminal law, and she called it. Her class was actually called How to Get Away with Murder. It was all about how to defend someone and get them off a murder charge. But the same sort of premise, from the very start that these group of students has killed someone, and why and how and will they get away with it is the basis of the story, and it's all told in flashbacks as well.
Yeah.
I feel like covering up a murder and
Or flash
defending a
forwards.
murder trial is completely different, though.
It is. But of course, defending a murder trial or prosecuting a murder trial is based on the evidence. So if you're able to cover up the evidence, you get away with murder. And lawyers know how to cover up evidence. In theory, they don't really. Well, they could potentially, but
I think anyone
they're a
who
bit
has
too
listened
lazy.
to true crime podcasts know exactly how to get away with murder.
Yeah, it's just that police are incredibly incompetent. No offense to any policemen out there that might be listening, but
There's just a lot of
by
paperwork.
there's so much. It seems like it's more paperwork than actually going out and doing stuff.
You would be horrified with the number of times that cases fall apart purely because paperwork hasn't been done correctly. And I feel like that's not really in the spirit of getting justice for people. Like, oh, you didn't submit the correct form under the correct legislation, therefore my murdering person gets to go free. Like, yeah, I don't like that.
Yeah, that's a whole other issue that we are not qualified to deal with.
No. Let's
Hey,
stop that now.
I did a semester of law school, thank you.
Oh, yes. While we're on the topic of books not finished, I want to add one more thing, which is the Dark Tower series by Stephen King.
I literally read the first page of the first book and went, nope.
No, see, things
Man in
I
Black
read.
fled across the desert.
He did. I read the first 2 books and I really liked it. And I got halfway through the third one and stopped. And I don't know if this has happened to either of you, but I want to talk about it because I read the first book and the second book back to back, then started the third book. And by the time I got halfway through the third book, I was just sick of that world and needed a break from that world.
That has happened to me.
Yeah, and since then, if I'm ever reading a series of books, I always read at least one book in between because I feel like reading too much is just I don't know if overwhelming is the right word, but it's just a lot. And I try and and that's what happened to me with the Dark Tower. I think the third book is The Wastelands. I think, and I've always intended to go back to it and just have never gotten around to it.
You didn't even get to the part where Stephen King inserted himself into the story yet.
No, and see, I've heard that happens, and
James.
I'm kind of like,
no, not James. Father Callahan, has he shown up? No, he wouldn't have shown up yet either.
No, and I'm pretty sure the Man in Black is Rick Flag from The Stand.
Theorized, I think. I don't know if King's ever confirmed it.
I remember when I was listening to when I was listening to The Stand, I'm pretty sure I looked up Randall Flagg's like Wikipedia, and it does mention him in the Dark Tower.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I did the same thing, believe it or not, with Harry Potter. I read from the first one all the way through to the Half-Blood Prince, And then I started the Deathly Hallows, and I said, I need a break from Harry Potter for a little while. And then, of course, we found out that J.K. Rowling is not a good person.
Mm.
And so I haven't gone back to it.
Have you actually read the Deathly
For
Hallows
various reasons.
in the past, though? Were you
No,
rereading? You just never got to the
no.
Deathly Hallows.
No.
Oh, the film makes no sense if you have not read that book. they cut so much out to the point where it was incomprehensible if you had not read the series.
All I know is that Voldemort is clearly the worst wizard to have ever lived. He couldn't even kill some teenagers. He couldn't kill a baby. A baby. Just
but it was
looking
love.
out the window.
Love protected Harry.
Love protected Harry from the spell. Love would not protect Harry from being yeeted out a bedroom window.
See, I read I think it was a meme I saw the other day that said like Sirius Black should not have been wrongfully imprisoned because they literally live in a world where you can pull someone's memories out and truth potions exist.
Yeah.
Hey, shut up. And so anyway,
like seriously, if you think too hard about Harry Potter, it all falls apart. Like people have, put in all of these ridiculous theories and ridiculous thoughts about what J.K. Rowling was intending with stuff. And it's just like, no, she didn't intend any of that. She was a piss poor planner, and like screw her with Dumbledore was gay all along. It's like, no, like if you wanted to write a gay character, write a gay character. You don't just like put in teeny tiny like implied things which actually don't imply anything at all, and then say 10 years after you've made your money, oh yeah, he was gay. Like that's called queer baiting and it's terrible. Don't do it. Actually have visible characters. Thank you. Rant over. Microphone drop.
Also, I've worked with a lot of teenagers. They're not that strong. I feel like Voldemort could have punched him to death if he wanted to. It wouldn't have taken much either. He wasn't very buff. He was in a closet his whole life.
See, here is the big thing with the Harry Potter books versus the movies. We're going off topic here, but I want to say this about this. I went to see Half-Blood Prince, the movie, which I think is probably the worst of the Harry Potter movies, in my opinion.
So yeah, that like so bad.
We got no disagreement with that one.
No.
Right at the end when it's revealed, spoilers for the Harry Potter series if anyone hasn't read it, when it's revealed that Snape has kind of betrayed, quote unquote, Hogwarts, and Harry is, and this is just a movie thing, by the way. I don't think it's in the book. I can't remember. I haven't read the books in years. Harry is chasing after Snape and he's shooting his wand and Snape's just easily blocking it and then shoots back at Harry, and Harry's on the ground and Snape escapes. I saw that with some older people that hadn't actually read the book, and we came out of that, and this one person's complaint was that, Harry should have knocked Snape over and said, yes, I'm powerful too, I can beat you, and it would have been this big moment. And I kind of turned and went like, but Harry is a painfully average student. Like, he is nothing special when it comes to magic. He's not even in the top 50% of students at Hogwarts, I think. He is painfully average, and Snape would have knocked the floor with him if he was actually trying.
He does Expelliarmus really well, and it's made fun of in the book, and that's about it. How he gets to become an aura later on, when it's revealed that, again, J.K. Rowling revealed in her reveal stuff after the books had been published that Ron and Harry become auras, but they never went back to Hogwarts to finish their last year of Hogwarts. Like, well, how did they become like the most powerful wizards' jobs?
He got better.
He got better.
Like I
said, not a good writer.
To be fair, Harry Potter, kind of defeated Voldemort, so he's riding off that. He's going to be riding on those coattails the rest of his life.
It's definitely his name that rides off.
Yeah, and Ron was there too.
So I still feel like it says more about Voldemort than it does about Harry.
Yeah.
Not only could you not defeat a mediocre wizard, he was a teenager.
But getting back to Brayton's point about
Yeah.
getting too overwhelmed with a particular world, that's fair enough. I'm trying to think if that's ever happened to me. I can't I think maybe the Odd Thomas series, actually. It was just like, oh, back to like, back in this world. But it's not like really a fantasy world, so I don't think it's the same. I'm just trying to think
I was
what.
going to ask about Discworld, whether that's happened to you, but as far as I know, like Discworld's each book is different enough from each other that it's almost
Yeah,
like a whole new book.
the advantage with Discworld is the way that Pratchett set it out was that he does have his groups of stories. So he has like the Watch stories, the Witches stories, the Rincewind stories, and then later on, he has the Moist von Lipwig stories, and
That
they
is the best
and the
name
Death
ever, by the way.
stories. So like the ones where Death is sort of, and his granddaughter Susan are the main characters. So those stories are like, and then he'll have like one-off stories as well, sort of in between, like which one is like Pyramids and Gods, I think, are very standalone stories. So even though you're in the world of the Discworld, you do get that break in the style because the story being told is very different from one novel to the next. And I actually did a few years ago read all of the Discworld novels from start to finish. And I can't even remember how many there are. There's at least 30.
41, I think it is.
God, is it that many? So I did read them all from start to finish. And admittedly, by the time I got to The Shepherd's Crown, which is his very last Discworld novel, I was a little bit Discworlded out. And admittedly, and maybe we can go into more detail on a particular Pratchett episode that we do in the future. But yeah, the Shepherd's Crown was actually kind of disappointing. But I don't want to criticize him because he was getting towards the end of his faculties, essentially. If people don't know, Terry Pratchett did pass away, I think in 2016 now, from Alzheimer's. He actually was very unwell for a couple of years. I can't remember if he did actually get assisted dying,
I don't
because
think
he was
he
a
did.
huge advocate for assisted dying, and he actually did like a little documentary series
Yeah,
about.
I've seen that documentary. It's fantastic.
Yes, so
Yeah.
I think he did.
No,
In the end,
I
I
don't
can't
think
remember.
he did. I'll quickly Google it.
Okay. But in any case, The Shepherd's Crown is the fifth Tiffany Aching story. So it's actually more of a young adult novel, compared to the rest of his Discworld series. And I just felt that the Tiffany Aching story was beautifully bookended with the fourth book, which name actually escapes me at this stage. I think it was I Shall Wear Midnight. Had a beautiful ending. And then The Shepherd's Crown just kind of continued, and it kills off a major Discworld character. And the death to me felt like nothing. But I think that was supposed to be the point for who this particular character was. It would have been a big shock. And I think people would have liked a more, I don't want to say amazing death, but like, I don't know, something bigger than what actually happened. But I think
Yeah.
that was the point. And like, this is hard to sort of explain when you're not talking about who the character is, because I don't want to spoil it if you haven't read it. But yeah, it was just like, I felt like it was a story that didn't really need to be told. Perhaps if he had wanted to write one last Discworld story, it could have been something else. And he did still have so many ideas. His daughter wrote a prologue to the story, I think, about talking about how he had unfinished notes in relation to other storylines involving other characters. He had one more Watch story that was kind of like half imagined. He had another Von Lipwig story. And it all got destroyed. That was a whole thing. She had this whole thing about, once my father is dead, his works will not be produced the way Douglas Adams has had works produced posthumously. And she made a big show of actually destroying his hard drive. You can find that on YouTube. I think they put it on his official Instagram account or something. So yeah, I was kind of disappointed we didn't get those stories because of where it ended up. But at the same time, it was still, it was still a fairly good book, but you could kind of tell that he was slipping a little bit. Because he was a very, very clever man, very satirical, sometimes beautifully poignant with how he would take, very topical issues and twist it to fit the Discworld. And he was very ahead of his time with a lot of issues that he spoke about. And yeah, so if you have not read Discworld, and if we do go into a Discworld episode, I will talk more about it, why I love it and how I got into it. And I will always recommend Discworld, especially the Watch series. The Watch is always my favorite to read.
Yeah. I've only read The Color of Magic so far, but I've got 3 other Discworld books sitting at home on my shelf that I want to get into at some point.
If you do start Discworld, it's good to start it from start to finish, because a lot of stuff gets set up that is important to know for future stories, but not necessarily. So if you do want to start with the Watch series, for example, you can start with Guards. But yeah, the first couple of stories, the Rincewind stories, are a little bit weird. And yeah, so it can be a little bit of a slog to start off with, but I recommend definitely sticking it out because they're very funny and they're very clever.
Yeah, let me read a couple more novels, and then I do want to get into a whole Discworld episode. Nice. I just looked it up. He was natural causes. He passed away from complications with Alzheimer's.
Yeah. Okay. I wasn't sure if he had gotten that far or not, but I know that he was an advocate.
Yeah, he absolutely wasn't.
I've never read any Terry Pratchett. I have read the first Dark Tower book, and because I absolutely adore Stephen King, and I understand that if you read all the Dark Tower books, it actually does tie in a bit of a bigger metaverse for a lot of his stories. So hopefully one day I'll get through them.
It's very different from his usual stuff.
It is.
But having said that, the only other Stephen King book I've read is The Stand, which is his, I guess, magnum opus, I guess.
It is. It is. Of his early years, I think 11/22/63 is probably the one for his later years.
Yeah.
It's considered his best of the last 10 years or so.
Yeah, I've got a few King stories on my to-read list, which I will get to eventually. I've got so many books on my to-read list. Well, I think that might be time to wrap up.
Excellent.
We did it. Yay.
We did it.
Huzzah!
Episode 2 done. We may or may not have stayed on topic, but it doesn't matter.
We're not helpful.
No, we are not helpful. When you read the topic of the podcast, don't come in expecting us to talk about it for any length of time.
I mean, it's literally there in the title. It really is.
We are promising exactly what you get delivered.
Yeah. If you're disappointed, that's on you.
Yeah, that's not on us. We had fun.
But what's our email address?
Okay, our email address, which I've set up, is nothelpfulpod@gmail.com. So nothelpfulpod@gmail.com. I'm really hoping I spelled that right. But
love it.
It will be in the show notes as well.
If we don't get any emails, it's your fault.
If we don't get any emails, I'm assuming we're doing an awesome job and no one has any critique. So I'm just going to go.
I would like at least one complaint about my use of the word nips.
Excellent. What else? We're planning on setting up a Facebook page.
Yep. I'll get to it.
Point. Yeah, get to it. Eloise has been volunteered by the rest of us to be our social media manager.
Yeah. We won't show you photos of us. Instead, we'll show you photos of 3 more attractive people.
Yeah.
And
probably created by AI so we can get peak physical attractiveness.
Yes.
Peak rage from people. Don't use AI.
I don't mind a bit of
Nothing
peak
wrong.
rage as well.
That's
Nothing
true.
wrong with AI. Think smarter, not harder, or work harder, not smarter. If you can
Think,
get if you can get someone else to do your thinking too, then that's just a bonus.
think outside of the box, but in the box, without the box, and the box is actually a triangle.
Yeah, just about sums it up, doesn't it?
My
does.
boy is a box.
What's in the box?
What's in the box?
So the podcast is up on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, and I'm also uploading the audio to YouTube. I think that's all the places we can find. If there's somewhere I've missed that someone wants to listen to, let me know and I'll see if I can put it up on that platform. And apart from that, I think we had pretty good response to the first episode from the people, not the admittedly small audience that listened to it, but we got some really nice feedback. So thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you for those who have listened. If you've gotten this far, thanks for sticking with us.
At least 2 people who listened to it, and they're both still friends with me, so can't have been too bad.
We don't count.
In that case, I have nothing.
Oh.
Next episode should be good. I'm heading to Supernova tomorrow.
Ooh.
And I'm hoping to buy a heap of books and get them signed by the authors. So I was thinking I'd love to do kind of like a go through the books I got, but I don't know if that'd work on an audio medium. So I was thinking maybe making some sort of YouTube video or something and putting it up on the channel.
Sounds like a good idea.
We'll see what happens. I'll have to think about it. All right. Anything else from you two before we sign off?
No. Thanks again for joining us, everyone.
Now go out there and fail Triple N. You've earned it.
What?
Triple N. You've earned it. Be good to yourself.
I just hope you're not an Optus so you can actually get access to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Topical humor. That's what we're for.
Topical. Yeah. People in 2 years' time will not understand that.
All right. See you later.
Bye.
Bye-bye.